My guest today is Jen Schellinck. She will talk to us about the realities of consulting.
Yeah, so my background is that I own a data science company in Ottawa. I'm the principal of that company, and what that means is that I both run the company, but I'm still involved in projects. I tend to do projects with a lot of other consultants where we all form a team and then tackle a project together. And I've been head of my own company since 2012 at this point, so that's 8 years. So that's my current situation. So I had not too long before then finished my PhD at Carleton. But even when I was doing my degree, I had always thought that I would probably want to, after doing my degree, sort of get into working for myself. Right after my degree, I was really lucky. As I was finishing it, I got hired by a company that was doing a lot of consulting. So I basically worked sort of for like a consulting shop for a couple of years, learned a lot doing that, and then I went on to start my own company.
So your degree obviously was in mathematics and statistics?
Obviously. No, my degree was not. My degree was in fact in cognitive science, which is an interdisciplinary degree. It covers a lot of ground. I do have a background in computer science myself. And then within that degree, it pulls in a lot of social sciences, but also philosophy. So it's quite diverse. That I try to straddle both worlds, to be honest. I mean, I think that I feel very comfortable in the qualitative world, but my computer science background gives me a sort of a quantitative perspective as well. For me, at least, it's very valuable to have both. I think it certainly impacts how I approach projects, for sure. So I'm very comfortable with projects that benefit from a range of strategies. And sometimes I will usually use both qualitative and quantitative techniques. I usually have a part where I'm collecting like what would be considered qualitative data. And then there's usually a part that gets nice and crunchy, where I get to do some more crunchy stuff.
So you and I first met in 2014, I think. By then you had clearly established a footprint in the consulting space. I mean, you had been trained as part of your previous consulting company. You had struck out on your own. What made you decide to try consulting in the first place? I mean, you had an academic background. By all accounts, you could have been heading for an academic career. At some point, you veered, or perhaps you were never going for an academic career. But what made you decide, or what made you think, consulting, that could be something worth trying?
I think I was lucky in that in some respects, it's kind of a family thing for me. So I have academics in my family, but a lot of my family, they are also entrepreneurs. I have more entrepreneurs in my family than academics. Even when I was quite young, I knew that was a possibility, that's something that people could do. And I think even when I was going through school, I was always jumping back and forth. I would do some like a degree, and then I would go work for a while, and then I would come back and do another degree, and then I would work for a while. So I've always kind of jumped back and forth. And even from a pretty young age, I was always kind of interested in doing my own thing and running my own company. You can never stand still as a consultant. So if you ever want to reach a point where you're like, oh, I've figured it all out now, I'm just going to, use my knowledge base and do my thing. That is not a bad thing. Like that, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a successful consultant, you cannot do that. I'll just preface this by saying a lot of things are kind of like, they're a double-edged sword. So there's good aspects to it and bad aspects to it. But for me, one of the big positives is just the sense of fun and novelty. Coming back to the always learning thing, I love always learning. And so for me, just the fact that it gives me the opportunity to be in really, novel situations, have novel experiences, things are never cookie cutter. For me, overall, that's a tremendous positive to at least the type of consulting that I'm doing. You're always in a new space, meeting new people, and I really, really like that.
What about some of the less pleasant aspects of being a consultant?
Okay, well, there are. Oh yeah, there are. Well, okay, in this case, I'll go for one that is like, it's not even, I would put it in the double-edged sword category. It's like straight out bad, is that as a consultant, you are fully responsible ultimately responsible. You can try to offload it, but at bottom, you're responsible for all your financial stuff, all your administrative stuff, all of your contracting stuff. And nobody else is going to do it for you. And like I say, unless you make lots of money and you can always just, hire people to do that, which is probably not going to be the case, at least right off the bat, you are going to have to do it. And this is not something I like to do. You would think as a consultant that you'd be like, I really want money. And by doing all of this, I mean, that sounds terrible, but it's a reality. You need money as a consultant. So
Why does it sound terrible?
I don't love the money part of it. It's not the part that I look forward to. And because it often comes with a lot of administrative overhead. And so for me, that's not a good part of consulting.
But it's a necessary part of consulting.
If I don't do like my administrative piece, I literally don't get paid.
Because the clients won't pay you if you don't invoice
Yeah, they
them.
literally won't pay me unless I say, here's the form, here's the invoice.
Have you ever had clients who have been like pestering you to send them an invoice so that they can pay you?
So Pat and I have worked quite a bit together, and we usually sometimes one of us will work for one and one of us will work for the other, which means that yes, sometimes Pat has been like, Jen, I know you want to get paid. Can you do the things you need to do? So.
Because, I mean, from the point of view of the client, we'll turn this into a teaching moment. From the point of view of the client, if you do not send them an invoice, they cannot close their file internally. They cannot pay you.
No, exactly. It's like, and that's the funny thing about all of this is that it turns out that there's, from an administrative perspective, there's all of these systems and all of this machinery. And it's really not about, in some weird ways, it's like, it's not about the money piece. It's just about, we have to stop the machinery from getting gummed up.
The clients don't really know what it's like to be a consultant, but the consultants also don't typically know what it's like to be a client and how to work on the other side of the table. So that's, it's not a bad idea to sometimes, hire subcontractors to be your consultants. You'll be the client, and then you can sort of figure out how these things work as well.
I could not agree more. In the last little while, I have been hiring people to do some work for me, and suddenly I'm in the client seat, and it's actually really valuable because I realize I'm doing some things as a client where I'm like, oh my gosh, clients have done that to me before, and I'm totally doing that. And so it does, I think it's really valuable if you can get it to have that perspective as well.
You might also realize that the client wasn't necessarily trying to be mean or like trying to be like evil. There might be like forces that are imposing certain types of behavior. I'd like to eventually touch back on this idea. As you say, you're starting to work with more people. I suspect that as long as it's just you and yourself and your reflection in the mirror working on projects, you don't have to, get too big, or you don't have to worry about project management. You're just one person working on one project. As you gain more experience and you're getting more known in the ecosystem of consulting, presumably there's more demand for your services, and then you need to learn how to deal with either people you're contracting out to or getting people to work for you as a consultant, but also presumably as part of these sort of like joint ventures or these consortium of groups where you can presumably simplify some of these tasks in some way. Is this something you'd like to
Yeah, I think this has been a really, yeah, this is kind of one of the surprise things. If we want to talk about surprise things, my surprise is how all of that piece works in the consulting world, in the sense that, you know, when I thought about, do I want to have an office career? Do I want to be a consultant? One of the things I was thinking about was, well, I don't really want to have like a traditional office life where you go in and again, I have to emphasize, I'm not saying this because this is a bad thing. Just for me, like my preference was I didn't want to have that traditional office life. But what I have discovered as a consultant is that, and also just as somebody running a company, is that you do have very much like your community that you're working with. You do have effectively colleagues. You do have all of these things. It's just in a slightly different context. You really are not an island. You really are not. I mean, I suppose there might be some consulting fields where that is more or less true. But for me, I'm really embedded in this world of people, and there are people I work with, and so you have relationships that last over time. And so it was just surprising to me that even though I don't live in a traditional office context, I still have a lot of those relationships. You know,
it's strange because in the consulting ecosystem, we're not teammates, at least not completely teammates with all the other consultants. We're not fully rivals. I mean, technically, they're not competitors. Sometimes we work together. Sometimes we work on separate projects. Sometimes, unbeknownst to us, we might be competing for the same client and the same projects. Yeah. It's actually pretty good to maintain good working relationship with these other consultants, even though you might not ever technically be working with them.
Yeah, and I mean, your other consultants, as you say, you might be thinking, oh, they're my competitors, I shouldn't talk to them. But other consultants are really your colleagues. And, you know, when you meet somebody else who is a consultant, for me at least, my first reaction is, oh my gosh, let's sit down and have a beer and talk about consulting. And you're kind of in that space.
Every consultant loves talking about consulting.
I know. Yes, they do. By nature, like I know it's popular right now to say, oh, you're introverted or you're extroverted, whatever. But I'll just say, okay, I'm fairly introverted. So when I was starting this, I was like, oh, I just can't wait to just like work in my house. That'll be so great. But I was surprised to discover that I do like getting out there, and I do like, you know, working in coffee shops and networking and meeting people. And I think it was a pleasant surprise to me that once I had the chance to kind of, again, have a bit more agency over that, I found out that I liked it. Yeah, I mean, I have two projects that I would highlight on that front. And then for my least favorite projects, I can probably just make sort of an amalgam of a few of them. So the two that come to mind are, actually, they're both projects that I worked with you on. And one of them is a project I worked on. I'll just say it's a project I worked on for foreign affairs. It was kind of a two-parter project. I liked both parts of the project. And it was just it was a nice project because we were doing some work for them, looking at it was very much a bread and butter project from a data science perspective. We were looking at what data they had, whether the data was in good shape, what sorts of interesting things they might do with the data, how it would mesh with their system. And it was just a nice project because the clients were, I really enjoyed working with the clients. The clients were like cooperative and nice to chat to. And in terms of the work itself, one of the very few times when we actually just got the data almost right away, which is not something that's really rare. So that right away, I was like, yes, that was the project.
I remember thinking there was a client that sort of went to bat for us. Stakeholders wanted to hire some database specialists, and the client says, no. What we want is people who can read and understand data. the memory that I have is that the data quality was horrendous. It was really, 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 really cruddy data. And yet, when you think back on it, and we basically pulled off. I used to have a full head of hair with that before this project, and now I'm a balding old man. Even though the data was very, very, very bad, we still have fond memories of the project. So it's not so much about the great data quality and whether we were able to achieve great things with the data. We couldn't achieve great things with the data. The data was bad. But part of the project was telling people, hey, your data is really bad.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing about that was that we had sort of established that up front. So it wasn't a surprise to people. And yeah, like the client was really on side with us. And it was all about like, okay, this is a situation. What do you do moving forward from this? How can we work with it? So it was actually a very, despite that, it was a very positive project and just a very positive experience. So my second favorite project is well, you're gonna find this. So I NWMO sprang to mind. I should point out that Jen and I have very diverging memories of this project. She is allowed to have her own opinions about how well it went. I have a separate set of ideas about it, but okay. So this was why I kind of picked this project when I was thinking about it, because one of the things I want you to sort of like, which are your projects that are your favorite project or project that went really well? And I initially had a lot of difficulty because every project is going to have its ups and downs. And every project, when you look back on it, you're gonna be like, well, I really like that. That part of that project was a favorite thing for me. That part of that project was not a favorite thing for me. So I think that that's the reality of projects, is that there's going to be a lot of highs and lows in them. But so for the NWO project, the reason I picked it was that just from a crunchy getting to chew through some theory. In some ways, it was an R&D project, and we had the license to try and come up with new techniques for doing the type of analysis that they wanted. And the funny thing is, even though technically as a data scientist, you would think that would be a common opportunity, in my experience with a lot of projects, that getting to actually do R&D and getting to actually come up with new techniques is somewhat of a rarity. So I remember that project fondly for the fact that it let us, for a good amount of time, just sort of sit in a room and think about how to tackle that problem.
So one of the memories that I have of this is that you did a masterful job of wrangling the clients. We had in the client space, there were a number of specialists who were very hesitant, in fact, actively pushing back against NWMO bringing in some outside consultants to work on this. And I remember one in particular, I won't name who the person is, but who at first was basically questioning our qualifications to even be part of the conversation. And by the end of the project, I feel you had sort of basically turned him around, and now he was like one of the believers in this approach, right? I mean, at some point, and I think that was mostly on you, because I was ready to basically just tell him to go take a hike. But I think you did a pretty good job at showing him that we were really on the same side, that we were trying to help him and WMO as a whole to solve their problem. And I think anyway, your work there was essential to get this turnaround from that specific.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting project, and that's not uncommon on projects. And I think the biggest thing is it's really hard not to take it personally. In those situations, that's why you need a team. If I couldn't do that for a particular person, then you could step in and do that potentially. So
I definitely felt with this project that as a team, we dealt excessively well with the client. But at least from my memory, I think of this as a project where you and I specifically, constantly butted heads on the approach to
yeah. So we're like, okay, we're dealing with the client really, really well. And it's true that we would sort of go back into the room and just be like, oh.
I mean, you've seen this drawing that I commissioned. There's basically 5 people at a table, and 2 people are clearly having a go at one another. It's inspired by this very project. But this is an important point as well. I mean, the team isn't always going to be on the same page, but you're all pulling in the same direction. You all have the same goal of eventually helping the client. And so I'm pretty happy that we were able to put our differences, they were just methodological differences. They weren't like
we weren't like into the
finger pointing. I'm just happy we were able to put our methods differences aside so that we could still achieve something that we wanted to achieve. Another reason why I think it didn't go so great is because, well, the client hadn't told us that they had hired a second group of consultants at the same time as they had hired us to work on this project, and the second group of consultants had done something different, and we sort of got dropped by the end of the first phase.
And interestingly, at the time I was very surprised by that, but I've actually been in other situations where that has happened. So I think that's not an unusual situation. You know, people are hedging their bets and they're kind of like, well, let's just see. And again, I think it's hard not to take that personally, but at a certain point you have to be like, you know what, you're the person paying people. You want to do that, then go for it.
Have you seen the TV show, The Mandalorian?
I watched it over Christmas with my brother.
Oh, you know how the client basically hires the bounty hunter to go capture the child, and unbeknownst to the bounty hunter, Mando, when he gets there, it turns out that there's another bounty hunter on the case. In fact, all the bounty hunters have been hired to recover the asset, the child, Baby Yoda, such as it is.
So this is a thing, right? Yeah. And, you know, but that's a great example, because in the end, I think he teamed up with another bounty hunter, if I'm not mistaken. So,
well, we don't. Spoilers. Hold on. Spoilers.
You can cut that part out.
No, I will not. I want people to know the full extent of your iniquity.
But yeah, I mean, I think my least favorite project, and this is not a general consulting thing, this is very specific to data science, but if you hire someone to do a data science project and then you can't give them any data, it's not going to be one of my favorite projects. Yeah, so I've had a number of projects that were really not my favorite because of that. But
hang on, you'd think this is like outlying behavior. How common is it, actually?
Well, since I said that my favorite project was the one project where they gave us the data right away, that should tell you. So there's just varying degrees of it. I mean, so there's like, we give you the data right away, there's we give you the data halfway through the project, and then we get to the very end of the project and I've still never seen the data, which has happened. And that's not great. I guess you could say, well, if they paid me anyway, then I shouldn't complain.
But you still want the feeling of having done what you set out to do at some point. Like, you'll be judged or gauged based on whether you can accomplish your goals. And even though it's not your fault that the goal hasn't been met, you know, the client's always right, so we don't flat out tell the client, hey, numbskull, I can't do the project without the data.
Yeah.
So you have to find some ways to still give them something which isn't what they originally wanted, but you don't have all the pieces at your disposal.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, other than that, I think my least favorite projects are generally ones where there's a lot of interpersonal stuff, which just happens sometimes, and it could be internal to the team, it could be the client to the team, and sometimes it's even that there's a lot of politics in the client organization, so it's like between the client and other people in their organization, and you just get pulled into that. But if any of those combinations happen, it makes a project just a bit of a slog. Well, there's been a lot of learning for me. I mean, one of the things is just, you're just going to have to get more organized. No matter how organized you think you are, more organization is better. Yeah, and I guess I should be careful because, of course, you can go too, I suppose it's possible to go too far in the sense of, like, you know, yeah, everything planned out to the minute on a Gantt chart or something like that. I mean, I think you would appreciate, Pat, me saying, you know, you need some flexibility.
Yes.
You need to be flexible, but just in terms of you're your own boss, Nobody is telling you what to do. Nobody is keeping track of what you're doing except yourself. Nobody is really going to tell you what to do. So you really have to be on top of things. It's a work in progress. Like, you're always finding, well, I'm kind of on top of this thing now. I'm kind of on top of this thing now, but I could be on top of this thing. And I really think that the more, and again, I don't mean in sort of like a rigid, slavish way, but the more you're kind of really committing to stay on top of things and figuring out what's going on, I think, the better it's going to get.
Even when you think you're on top of things, you can probably be more on top of things. And even when you think you're flexible, you can probably be more flexible. Words of wisdom.
Yeah. There you go. And again, I don't know if this is true for everyone who is a consultant, but you really do learn about yourself doing this stuff. To be successful, I want to say you have to be, maybe you don't have to be introspective. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but you prepare to be humbled is kind of what I would say. Like, you're going out there. One of the things I really like about consulting is that it's, in a funny sense, it's very real. There's a phrase that they talk about. It's like you eat what you kill, which sounds kind of like, it's kind of weird, but it's true. Like, if you do not get the business, you do not make the money. You are going to be talking to people about very nitty-gritty things. How much am I worth? Like, how much are you going to pay me? This kind of thing. And you have that type of conversation a lot. Your responsibility to make projects go well. And you're working to work with different teams of people. So it's a humbling process.